record it to this computer and we're away. So, got a Koto. George, can we hand it over to you and I'll bring up the slides, shall I?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Derek, and welcome everybody. Um, Whether you're here with us now or whether you're watching this after the fact, we're glad that you joined us. And we hope that we can add to the presentation that we did in New Orleans and that it'll be helpful for you. So we have a couple of goals for our hour together today. The first goal is that we really like to focus in on understanding, on the shift of the ownership of learning that takes place when you increase agency in your school or in your classroom to a more powerful learner-centered learning. We'd also like to really focus on the know. So, how do you know? And one of the things that has been created by Derek and another colleague, Marcia, is a companion guide. And the companion guide is really meant to help introduce the agency by design framework for your school or for your district, and really help you to navigate how to use the guide, how to use the framework rather, and how to implement it in your school. And then the last piece is really how to do. So identifying the starting point. So, and I think one really important point is that there are many starting points. There's not just one. And we're going to introduce you to an assessment tool that you can use that will help you identify where the right starting point is for you in your school and in your context. So again, welcome. And I particularly like to welcome my colleagues. So Derek and Annette, who were co-authors with me and Marcia on the Agency by Design playbook. And then also our collaborators on the presentation that we did at the full-scale symposium, our colleagues from Colorado, from the Metropolitan Arts Academy, and from Arkansas, from Shelley, who is a principal at an outstanding school there. So welcome to my colleagues and welcome to all of you that are joining us. So a little bit about Agency by Design. So this is really a follow-up to an article that Derek and Marcia and our mutual friend Joe DiMartino did a number of years ago that really laid out the case for agency in schools and in classrooms. The idea behind Agency by Design really is to operationalize it for schools and for teachers. So we've identified 14 different components in the framework. And some of those components are meant to be things that are done by the teachers. So those are the conditions that teachers can create in their classroom that lead to a more agentic classroom, more agency for students. And then the other 7 are characteristics that are observed in student behavior. So if you're looking at students and what they're doing in the classroom, these are 7 things that hopefully you will see and you should be looking for in terms of assessing agency in your school. So we also want to get you to think a little bit about what are some of the ways that we can engage students in learning. And one of the ways that I like to think about this is to think about my own learning and to think about how I learn best and to think about those learning experiences that I've had in my life as a student and as a lifelong learner, as an adult. And what are some of the things that really make learning engaging for me? And I would ask all of you to think about those things, to think about in your own classroom, in your own learning, and in your own lives. What are the things that have made learning engaging for you? And then think about how you can create those same kinds of conditions in your classroom, so that your students will feel the same type of engagement that you felt. And also to think about the impact that those engaging learning experiences have had for you. So when you think about what are the really outstanding learning experiences that you've had in your life, and what did they look like? What were they all about? And how can we recreate those in the classroom for our students? And then finally, I would ask you to all think about who owns the learning? Who owns learning in general, but who owns the learning in your classroom? Who owns the learning in your schools? And who decides about the learning? And if the person or people who decide about learning in your school or in your classroom are the adults, then how can you shift that so that students are the ones who own their learning and are making the decisions about their learning? And so, framing our time together today in that way, I'm going to turn it over to Derek, and Derek's going to talk about how we can make this happen in your school or in your classroom.
Thanks, George. That was a great intro, and I appreciate that. So we've got a group of people online here who have got a lot of experience in putting all of this together. And as George explained before, we've got the companion guide we want to introduce you to and some specific tools, but I'm going to draw on their experience to perhaps give you some insights as to how that's worked. So let's just start with the companion guide. And if you're viewing now or watching later, there's a URL at the bottom there or a QR code that you can use to download the copy of the companion guide. It's free. And what it does is it takes you step by step through a process that you should consider taking if you are going to introduce this in your classroom, or more particularly, this is aimed at school leaders to see, provide some guidance for what you may do across a group of staff or your whole school. So if you the things that we're going to outline now come from that companion guide, but we're going to go straight to a little activity that appears in the guide, and the sheet that you can see on the screen now is available as an appendix in that guide. So if you download the guide, you will be able to access this sheet in many situations. And George and Shelley and Marsha and I we've done this in other workshops. We've handed these sheets out for people to look through. So on the sheet there are 14 statements, and for each statement you're simply asked to identify the extent to which this is true in your context. So one would be not, no, it's not true at all. We don't do any of that. Through to five is it's happening all the time. It's consistently true. And this particular one, where there are two survey forms that you can do. This particular one looks at, as George pointed out before, the conditions. These are the things, if we're thinking about wanting to create the right conditions where agency can move forward, these are the conditions. And so you'll see at the bottom of the screen here, there's a URL that will take you off to an online form where you can have a little bit of fun for a moment, filling out your response to those statements in the online form. And I'm going to defer in just a second. I'm going to ask Claudette to come on and just talk while you're doing that a little bit about what she did. They didn't use this form, but what she did in her school as they were thinking about embracing the agency by design book that they downloaded. So if you want to look at the form for a moment, and do that in the background to do. But Claudette, you came at a slightly different way. You were thinking as a principal about how you would set the conditions and release staff. Do you want to just summarize some of the thoughts that you shared with us at the conference about how you brought that into your school?
Sure. We were fortunate that one of our teachers had actually attended a meeting where the superintendent brought this forward as something we could do district wide. And she was the only teacher at the meeting and came back and brought it to life to me. Was super excited. And basically I said, hey, get your team on board at lunch and we'll go from there. And so by the end of the day, we had some preliminary binders made. As you mentioned, this is totally free. It's a free resource, free book. And so who says no to that, first of all? And she just really saw it was the missing piece in what we'd been doing with our implementation over several years with competency based. And so Dylan, who is on the meeting, shared it with her team, got them fired up. And then it just began to grow. People wanted to know, what are they doing in there? Why are kids so engaged? Why are our kids demonstrating this level of agency? What's happening in those rooms that's so different? And then it grew from there. And so this year, in this was all happened last year. In planning for this year, I asked that she and Kelly, we do some differentiated PD at the beginning of the year, where teachers rotate through centers just as students do. But these centers are, different. Some of them are district initiatives. Some of them are things, that we're doing as a school. But they're definitely led by the experts in the building, which are the teachers. And so I asked Kelly and Dylan if they would do a slow kind of rollout and get people engaged. And we had all of the binders ready to go. And that's, kind of how we rolled it out. We brought on middle school, and Dylan Lynch can tell you a little bit about that. As you were sharing the surveys from, the guide that you guys are, sharing with us today, I'm excited to get my hands on that and get that out as our next kind of data. Like, okay, where are we right now that we've had a year rollout? What does this look like? And then really looking at, what does it look like in primary? What does it look like in intermediate? What does it look like in middle? And kind of comparing that, and how can we shore that up and make it tighter school wide? And then also, what does this look like when we're looking outside of the box at things like our house structure and house activities, or other kind of student agency pieces that we have built into our building? So I don't know if that captures everything, but that's kind of our rollout as of right now.
That's great, Claudette, and I might come back to Dylan in just a moment to ask about how the application went, because that provides a really useful overview from a school leader's perspective. So if we come back to the conditions which you referred to, you'd like to look at the sheet. At the end of the day, you'll end up with a whole heap of rankings in that right-hand column, and there's an addition, or over the page, there's an area where you can find your score. And it's a little bit like some of those booklets where you add the score from certain questions together and it comes out with an answer. So, for instance, here, if you add the score from question 1 with question 8 together, you'll end up with a score in the total there. And those scores relate to the area of motivation and engagement, which you can see down the right-hand side. Those are the 7 themes or 7 elements in the book. So if we were to do this live, and because we haven't got a lot of people doing it live today, I won't go back into the online form, but you can try this on your own after that, or with the sheet from the conditions book. You would look down the totals and you might find, if, for instance, you had scored a couple of things a 5 because it's consistently true, you could have a total of 10. But equally, if it was pretty low and the numbers added together, you could have a total as low as 2, 1 and 1. So the idea here is that you can scan then down the totals. And if you're doing this as a whole staff, you have an opportunity then to average it out right across the staff to see where the strengths and the weaknesses are in terms of staff perception about what they're doing in these areas. And so if you took, for example, question 5 and question 12, you see those two things link together as curriculum. And it might be that people have responded to those statements and discovered that actually, in their decision making around curriculum and their choice of topics and how it's going to be approached, they don't really involve students much at all in that. And so their score for curriculum is a little low. So that gives them the opportunity then to go back to the framework and to look at where curriculum sits here on that framework as one of the conditions, and then to dive into the book and to look at what's provided there as a way of guiding you through. Now, before I show you how you might do that, I'm going to come back, as I said, to Dylan. And Dylan, if you want to make a few comments after what Claudette said about how you picked that up. You didn't have this survey available to you, but how did you decide where your starting point was?
So I think the thing that was most easily accessible to me as a teacher right away were the teacher and student look fors within the book. And so right away, I used those along with the rubrics in the back, and was able to identify and go through and say like, oh, I think I'm doing this, but look, here's an area, where I need to look at my practice and grow and change. And it's interesting because I have been looking at the survey as you guys have been talking, and I've already been able to utilize it and look for, an area that I need to grow and support. So for example, my curriculum scores were really high, but the spots where, I'm lowest and need to look at my practice and make changes are in support and supervision, which I think would align to how, I initially used the resource. I think, and that has definitely been a focus that I've taken this year, but can now look at it and grow even more so.
Thanks, Dylan. And I think that last comment reinforces what George said in the intro, that there's no one starting point here. There are lots of ways you could do that. So I'm coming back to what you said then about how you use that. That's exactly what we've done in the curriculum guide. We suggest that, in the companion guide, we suggest that once you have identified the area that you might want to delve into a little bit more, you go to the page where you'll find these. You called them the look fors. We call it the T chart. There's a lot of names you could give this, but it's just a simple representation that was actually developed using feedback from all sorts of places as we were putting the book together. Statements made by teachers and students about what their experience would be in this area. And so the encouragement is to go through and find that chart in the chapter. So I've chosen here the curriculum one, just as an example, and say, okay, now work our way down the teacher comments and say, to what extent do these things resonate with the way that we're operating, either in the class or across the whole school? And you'll see things like the third bullet point down there uses a term like, I use fertile questions, a way of encouraging students to engage actively with the subject. And you think, what's a fertile question? Well, there's the opportunity to go and do a little bit of hunting and discover what is meant by that. Of course, fertile questions, other people might refer to those as the ungoogleable questions. These are the questions that have no specific answer, but you are forced to actually continue to ask and to dig deep. And these prove a great way of expressing what we want to understand in curriculum. And then you move to the student side and you work down and you put your student hat on, just as Dylan was explaining, and start to think about, we could move on some of this. And so that's one of the most powerful activities that we've found you can do in a school. And of course, just leading on finally then is each chapter finishes with a simple rubric slice. And this is where, having had the conversations that lead you to that, you can find where you are on this progression from not yet evident to I'm initiating it, to I'm developing it, to I'm living it now, I'm implementing it, through to now I'm doing more than that, I'm transforming. All right. And so the statements on that rubric are intended to provide a snapshot so that you can see where you are on that journey. And of course, as any good rubric will illustrate, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to stay in that area forever and ever. A change in circumstance, a change in the students in your class, a change in the circumstances you have to respond to maybe at state or federal level in terms of requirements may cause you to move forward and sometimes move back in your assessment. But you can use this rubric, whether it's annually or even, half yearly, just to do that check-in to see how you're progressing in that particular area after you've formed the interventions. Now, it would be remiss of me to ignore the fact that each chapter has got more than just those 2 pages in it. There's a lot of information, including practical things that you can do to shift in that area. And I wonder if I go, Shelley, you've been involved in quite a lot of deliberate steps forward in the work that you've done in your school. I wonder whether, putting you on the spot, you might have an example of something that you've done in your school, which has kind of responded to a gap you've seen and a step forward in this agentic way.
Sure. Well, one of the things we did was use the Agency by Design playbook to use those rubrics and kind of just assess where we were and where we thought we were by gathering data across the grade levels. We have a guiding coalition. It consists of a teacher from each grade level, plus specialty areas, special education, and instructional assistants. So everyone gave their input. They took the surveys back to their teams. They gave their honest feedback. We brought it back together and kind of looked at it as a group and decided on some areas we thought we could grow, some areas we were strong. And actually, we used that information and had Annette come and teach us about design for learning, because we use passion projects at our school. And we really wanted to tie those to the curriculum, but also make them student interest driven. And she helped us with a game plan with that, with each grade level. And then Annette can talk about some of the things that she did for us. But also, we came back and visited again. Like, was that successful? What are we looking at now? Now, this year, the teachers wanted to focus on motivation and engagement. The teachers actually use that data from the Agency by Design playbook to help develop professional growth plans in that area. So they're taking that into action and making it very purposeful and intentional to grow their practice in that area.
Thanks, Shelley. Maybe just before I move on, you mentioned Annette may have something to add. Did you want to add to that in terms of what your role was in there, Annette?
Yes, I was going to give a shout out to Shelley and say, Shelley, share how you implemented that at your school. And I was I had a good time coming into Shelley's school and helping them really fine tune their passion projects to look at the rigor and also look at their standards. Teachers have so much to teach in so little time. And so being able to really make it real and look at their current curriculum and see what is it about it, what wonderings do children have, so that children can take control of their own learning, but also helps the teachers to look at what's coming up in their units of study for their grade level to make sure they could merge the two and really help the students design some incredible projects that were really student driven, but also the kids knew the curriculum, the kids knew the state standards for their grade level. And then also teachers within that, they wrote short-term goals, like what can I do tomorrow? And then when am I going to measure the impact of that? And then where are we going to be at the end of the year? And I'm only going to pick one goal as far as our passion projects. Where are we going to be at the end of the year? And then measure that. So I just did, some templates for them to be able to kind of find that progress. And then along the way, I came in to each grade level as they implemented and as they got stuck. Then in the learning pit, we just kind of processed ways to get out. It was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. That's great. So I'm going to pick up on what you were just talking about, because you're really moving towards some of the characteristics we'd want to see in students there. And just for the sake of illustration, and Dylan Lynch, I'm going to put you on warning that I'll come to you next, perhaps for an example from your area. But when we're thinking about the characteristics, you'll see a whole list there, and I've just picked one out there which actually aligns with what Shelley and Annette were just talking about, when we start to see learners as leaders of their own learning, what do we mean by that? It's one of those terms that comes up a lot. But we can do the same thing there, in that learner-driven learning. I've put on the screen there the look for or T-chart example, and the same thing just works. Where you can go down and see the sorts of statements you might expect a teacher to be able to make, where there is evidence of learners leading their learner, or being in the driver's seat, if you like, as George started by saying, and then flipping it over and saying, do we hear students make these sorts of comments? Now, Dylan, you gave some pretty interesting examples of the work that was happening in your area. I don't know whether you can directly make the link to what I've just tried to give you a segue for, but do you want to illustrate with some of the things you've done in your class when you pick this up?
Yeah, sure. I think the big thing is having, I like to outsource a lot of the hard work to the children. That's as best I can. And one thing that I did is I actually had students measure their own or my own proficiency of agency in the classroom by having them complete the survey. So I took these sort of student look-fors and said, okay, here's the survey for you. How well am I doing this? And so then students then were able to be leaders in their learning and say, here's areas of where we think we're doing well in the classroom, and here's areas where we're not. And so, like, for example, one of them was measuring success, and they said that that's something that we aren't doing a great job in showing agency in that. And then that was something that I really have said, okay, I'm going to take focus on. And so I did these with my level 7 and 8 students because I've had them before. And so they're familiar with sort of my classroom structure and what I'm looking for from them. And so then they get an opportunity to say, okay, well, this is where you can improve in the classroom. And then with my level 8 students, it's really great because they are the leaders of the building, and then they get to demonstrate their agency through our house structure. We're very lucky that we're partnered with older and younger students. And so those 8th graders get to be learners and demonstrate that agency to our preschool friends. And they're really the ones that are dictating, okay, this is how we can model some of these basic parts of agency at a younger age, so that it creates this sort of through line through the whole building. So I don't know if that was totally what you were looking for, but that's sort of how we've gotten to get it from all the way from the top and bringing it all the way down to the bottom.
That was spot on, Dylan, and it reinforces too with your final comment the fact that this same set of resources can be used across all age groups. It's not age specific. It's a set of conditions and characteristics that apply across all. And the other thing I'll add here, and it may be of interest, I hadn't talked to the folks from our Colorado friends really, but we have actually developed separate survey sheets like the ones there for teachers. We've actually developed them for students, and also a parent one so that you can get a view of parents. The thing is, we haven't made them available everywhere yet because they're untested. But if you'd like to have a copy of those and try them out, I see Claudette's thumbs up. And to anyone else on the call who may be listening, there are some email addresses at the end if you specifically would like those, understanding that they're not perfected. You'd be trialing them with and for us. Then we'd be happy to share those as well. Claudette, can I just come back to you
Sure.
a moment? I know Kelly's not on the call, but I'll come back there. But Claudette, the next part of what I want to talk about is a little bit about the leadership part of this. And I just wonder if, coming back again to your role as the leader, and you've got some great team members there and so forth, was there anything in particular that you found yourself needing to do or confront or think differently about to enable your staff to work in this way?
I had to grow as a leader and model what I wanted them to do with kids, which is very difficult. I'm very much a control freak by nature. And so, but when you hire brilliant people, you have to allow them to be the brilliant people that they are and not micromanage every little thing, right? And so I found myself looking into the book from that perspective of how can I grow? And by grow, I mean let go, right? Allow them to do these things, develop these things without me overseeing it very heavily, and just kind of enjoy it. So like when Dylan was just referencing, getting that feedback from his students, that's something he did on his own accord that I didn't even know about until he just shared that. And I thought, wow, how powerful to hear that for the first time here. Because to him, it's just business as usual, right? It's not something he's doing for the principal or to show others. He's just doing it as part of his natural growth as in his own pedagogy and as he develops his own leadership. So I guess I've just had to grow as a leader to be more open to allowing those same systems to grow with adults as well. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but one example I was thinking about when Dylan was talking was when we were talking about how this looks between the older kids and the younger kids, when he was speaking about that. Most recently, our house meeting we just had was teaching the younger kids what to say when they don't know what to say. And that to me just falls perfectly into this, right? Because it's this transfer of that agency of not only are they modeling it for themselves and with their own, age like peers, but we're handing it down to say, it's okay to say you don't know. And here's the words you can use to help get the clarification that you need to be able to attack that a different way and be able to still feel confident moving forward. So that was kind of where my thinking went when Dylan was talking.
Brilliant. And maybe a quick segue to Shelley. I've paused here so that we can have a discussion before we do our final wrap up. But Shelley, you're a leader in your school, and have experienced a lot of success in that. Is there anything you want to add to the sorts of things that Claudette was talking about your specific role as a leader of the staff in this?
Yes. Well, one of the things we realized right away is you've got racehorses, speedboats that will get out there and do it super fast, right? And they want to do it right now and they want to do it perfect. And then you've got others that are like, I want to see how that goes and see, what happens. And that's okay. And as a leader, you're supporting those people that really want to try that learner agency. And then it doesn't take very long in our experience that students really start owning that learning. They're not missing school because they want to be in class. They want to do those projects. They want to be part of the learning. They want to help other students. They want to track their progress. And when they start knowing that, they're more engaged. We saw they're more motivated. And then teachers love that too, because they're seeing the sparks and they're seeing that drive for student learning becoming partnerships, not just I'm responsible for this, you're responsible for that. They're really co-creating. And that is powerful. When students are saying, I'll be in charge of an extra learning opportunity on this skill because I feel like I can be of some service to some other students, that's agency. When they're saying, I want to track my progress, so I can show my parents at my student-led conference, that's agency. And so we have seen this shift happening over the last 8 years, and it continues to grow. We're not even where we want to be still, but we're getting there. And we have new staff coming on board. So my role is helping them understand what is student agency. Some of them are not really sure. And so I see my role as continuing to be that instructional leader who is helping support the work every day. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Shelley. I'm just going to take an opportunity here and put him on the spot, but I've got an old friend and colleague, Murray Edlin, sitting online here at the moment. Murray was a very successful school principal here in New Zealand when I lived in Christchurch. I watched and worked alongside Murray, and he's been assisting school leaders since he sort of retired. But Murray, I'm not sure whether this is, how much you've seen of this resource, and you've been sitting listening to some of these people who have been excited about implementing this. Is there anything that you want to comment on or questions you want to ask of any of the people who are online here at the moment about what we're speaking?
Yeah, tēnā koutou everybody, and greetings from down under at 12 o'clock. We started this. It's a slightly different time to some of you guys. And it's been a real privilege listening to the great work that you guys are doing in your schools and in your classrooms. As Derek said, I gave up that full-time work as principal 11 years ago now. I worked for a while with leaders. My main work now is with university, working with students when they're out on their teaching practice. And unfortunately in New Zealand, we're definitely moving away from agency into sort of a more dictatorial way of our schools operating. So one of the things that I've been able to do, in sort of picking up on what Derek's doing, is how can I infiltrate this into the students as they're going through the university. And so 2 points come to mind really. The first one is that a lot of the things that we've been talking about, and the idea of of students giving feedback to each other, the explicit teaching of that needs to happen as well. And I've been sort of highlighting that with students, that it just doesn't happen because you're going to decide that they should be giving feedback. We need to teach people how to give feedback. And that idea of having an answer to that question, what do I say if I do not know? I'm not quite sure who said that, maybe somebody anyways. And I think that's such a great thing. And the second thing is, the way I do this is, Derek had 5 questions that he put out that every child in the class should be able to answer when you've finished your lesson. And I can't remember them offhand. I couldn't find it quickly, but they're something like, why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? How am I learning when I'm doing it? And I think by putting those questions in as part of what our students do, it does open that gate for agency for the children and their learning. Yeah, I'm just blown away by what you guys are doing, and it makes me wish I was about 15, 20 years younger, so I could be back in the school sort of implementing this thing. Even though we did little bits of it, I think, Derek, certainly I can think back here in New Zealand, if we go back 20 or so years, some of these things were becoming quite evident. And unfortunately, over the last wee while, they've been buried by other directives we've had. So, yeah, thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Murray. That's good. You're prompting. I'm going to go back to our 2 Dylans at the moment, either or both or whatever, because as the people, the practitioners in the classroom, and picking up on what Murray's just said, it's true, isn't it? You guys are under pressure at the chalk face of external requirements, standards that have to be met, and all this sort of thing. It'd be interesting just if you've got an example you might give, or a comment you might want to make that might be helpful to Murray about what you're doing anyway, how you can still achieve this. Maybe Dylan Shilofsky, if we start with you, and then we'll come back to Dylan Lynch.
Yeah, totally. So I think one thing we're always having conversations around at our building is retention, and our kids retaining the information that they're learning from year to year. And so one thing I've been noticing, even right off the bat this year, is when my kids are so aware of, again, almost like those questions Murray was mentioning on why they're learning and what they're learning, and what the hope is, what they're going to do with it. When they have that awareness because they're so involved, then the retention becomes greater. So we're practicing all of these skills and work habits and everything that they're doing as they're developing projects and their own learning plans and how they're going to go about things. But I think the coolest part is then when we do have to turn around and, participate in the systems that are more standardized, or I can't think of another word for it. I think our kids are performing better than when we didn't have these systems in place. Because, and it kind of goes to, I think, what Shelley was saying, our kids want to come to school. And I think a huge part of that is we're an art school, which makes our school really unique. And so the kids want to come to school for that reason alone. But then when we start to incorporate the fact that they're the most important member of their learning team, and we put them at the center of everything that we do, then they want to come to school even more so. And so it's kind of the balance between, like, we're really lucky. Claudette is an incredible leader who lets us close the door and teach and do what's best for our kids. And then we have the outcome that then supports us getting to do that, if that makes sense.
It does. Dylan, you want to pick up from that?
Yeah, I think for our team, I mentioned this at the conference, is that we were getting students who, I think, unlike in years past, were ready to learn, and they were showing such a deeper level of critical thinking that our team did not want to be the reason that died on the vine. We wanted to say, okay, we have to continue this going because it's clear that it's working. They're seeing success in intermediate. How can we channel that and continue that on? Because I think it really is that there are systems in place that we good or bad, we have to follow. So really, I think it's how can we structure ourselves and make sure that students are coming to us and continuing with those critical skills in molding it so that it doesn't break the system, but it certainly makes it that we are able to bend to it. So again, this is kind of reiterating some other things that I've said, but we truly were so lucky that we just were like, these are great, really strong students that we're getting. We have to continue this work because one, it makes for a great learner. That's the most important, but it also, we're in a system where testing is important, and we have to make sure that students are ready both for the test, which we don't love, but also for the outside of the test. So agency gives us the ability to make sure that students are ready for both of those things.
Thanks, Dylan. And I didn't warn you, but Shelley, your school's just won award after award in the last few years, measured against state kind of standards and state expectations, and yet your school is running so efficiently in promoting learner agency and staff agency for that matter. Do you have a comment you want to?
Sure. Well, I think it's really important, like what you said, is that our staff has agency as well. Um, because when they feel like they can own their learning, it's more personalized, it's what they need right now. It helps them be able to support the learners that they have currently. And so a little bit about our school is we're about 73% free and reduced lunch rate. We're about 40% English language learners, meaning they are not proficient in the English language yet. And yet we're an A school. So Arkansas is one of the states that grades schools A through F. And we are one of, I think it was, I can't remember right now, but one of 15 maybe A's and so on, or 15%. Yeah, it was 15% of the schools in Arkansas were A's, and we were one of those. And then we just got notified this past week that we were one of the top 10% of schools in the state for growth on the Atlas assessment, meaning our school students are doing well academically. They're doing well both in achievement and growth on the Atlas, yet also demonstrating student agency at a high level. And we have schools coming to us on a regular basis to come and see what we're doing with our students so that it kind of can go like in railroad tracks. We're both teaching the academic side, but also the social emotional learning and the learner qualities and all the student agency right alongside that. So it's interwoven and it's interconnected, and you couldn't really tell the difference between them, is kind of where we're wanting to be. Now, sometimes we're not there. Like I said, we'll get new teachers and we're working with them. But overall, the culture is the students are the center. So
Thanks, Shelley. Well, look, I'm conscious of time and just wanting to get to the point where we can call George back in particular. I want to just share as we finish off, one of the things that we've been working on as a follow-up. So we've got the companion guide, but one of the things we've been working on as a follow-up is picking on what's just been mentioned by Shelley in particular and raised by Murray and also by Claudette a little earlier, and that is how essential leadership is in this whole thing. And so in the background, the team of us here are working, who wrote the book, are working on now a leadership by design concept for a book. To bring those important things together. As Shelley said, and Claudette's indicated also, the introducing all of the stuff about agency doesn't need to result in what Murray's expressed is seeing happen here in New Zealand, where it's sort of being pushed to the side because the test thing is becoming important. That actually learner agency is a quality, it's a condition, it's a disposition that will help them learn through whatever. And so just drawing attention here is that we've already produced 3 posts that are up on the new Learning Accelerator blog site, which is now part of it took over from Aurora Institute, now under their Full Scale label. I don't know when it'll change, but at the moment it's on the Learning Accelerator side. So you can find a 3-part series that we wrote there that captures some of this thinking around leadership by design. I encourage you to pull that in. Central to that, and I'm going to call George in just to speak briefly about it. We've borrowed from some of the work that he and his colleagues have been doing around the C's of leadership. George, do you want to just give us a quick update on that?
Sure, happy to, Derek. So some of the work that we're doing at the New England Association of Schools and Colleges is really trying to help schools and school leaders assess what are some of the areas that they need to focus on in order to be able to implement the changes that they want to change in their schools. And so we've identified these C's, the 4 C's, and part of our accreditation process really asks schools to look at the 4 C's and to identify where they need to work and what may be the potential blockers that keep them from being able to implement the changes they need to make. And now I'm going to have to test my memory to make sure that I can remember the 4 C's. But they are competency, they are conceptual understanding, they are capacity, and I always forget the 4th C.
You can find it on the second of the papers on that online form. You'll find them, I'm sure. I can't remember to help you out just here.
Yeah. But it's really important to make sure that you have the competency, that you have the capacity, that you have the conceptual understanding, and that you're able to implement the changes that you need to make. And if you don't have those things, then being able to assess where you're missing them and what you need to work on in order to be able to help your school, your classroom, to be able to implement the changes that you want to make.
Thanks, George. So look, as we wrap up there, the final slide I'll show you has our email addresses on it, and you'll get all of this sent out. I'm going to send the video recording and all of the links we've done at the end. But maybe just to wrap up, if we go around the room for a final comment about the potential of releasing our learners as owners of their learning, as George said right at the very beginning. This is fundamental thing here is about shifting the ownership of learning, what that looks at, or an encouragement about the book itself, or you name it. I'll go around the room, and Claudette, I'm going to start with you.
I think this shift has to happen everywhere, but I think we're really talking about a shift between agency turning into advocacy, right? And I think there's no greater time than right now for our learners to be advocates, not only for themselves, but for others. And so I think when looking at agency through that lens, I think we see the relevance in a totally different way, right? We're talking about the humans that we want to see running our world and giving them those skills and helping them to see that not only are they capable of it, but they can actually bring things to the table that will be accepted, that will be part of their school community, that they'll see happening, not just ideas for the future, but ideas that they can bring to the table that will be implemented now. So that's where I'm at with that.
Thanks, Claudette. Wonderful. Annette, can I go to you?
Well, I just think just being able to reassess consistently where you are in the journey, and then just being kind to yourself as you continue to learn as leaders and teachers. And I'm thinking of, in working with Shelley, find a buddy. Find somebody as you're implementing each week and say what went well this week, what what did we think was going to go well and what didn't. And and then problem solve, what can we do about that? So just give yourself some grace as you um, learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, in this learning journey.
Real wise words. Thanks, Annette. Can we
Mhm.
flick to Dylan? Now it's all jumped here. Dylan Lynch, you were the next on my list I was going to ask. Thoughts from you?
Yeah. I think this is sort of a good segue or follow up from Annette, is that it's a spectrum. I think that regardless of where you are, the only thing that can go wrong is if you don't try it. You don't. It's what students need and it's what students deserve. So the guide is great because it takes you even if you're at the very beginning stages, and helps move you along that spectrum. So
Thanks,
that's
John.
that's the big takeaway that I have.
Cool. So go to t'other Dylan. You want to follow that one up?
Yeah, and I think to segue off of that, um, I guess my final message would be kind of twofold. But first to leaders to look at Claudette and Shelley, and kind of like Dylan said, we live in a time where sometimes teachers don't want to be trusted. And so to take the leap and to trust the teachers in your building. And then I think my message to teachers is when you turn it over to kids, it can be really messy, but it's going to be really magical at the same time.
Hey, great. Shelley, can we move to you?
Sure. One of the things I was thinking is Martin Luther King Jr. has a quote, "You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step," right? We didn't even know what we were doing when we came back from New Zealand. Annette can testify. We were like, okay, how do we get started? How do we build capacity? How do we build a shared vision? We were trying to develop a strategic plan, and that thing got changed a lot of times. But just start. You have to start somewhere. Start little. It could be voice and choice in the classroom of simple, like you can do this or this to show your learning. That's simple, right? And then it can grow from there. So just taking small steps can have a huge impact in no time. So I would say just start.
Thanks. George.
Yeah, commitment. That's the last C.
You found it.
So capacity, conceptual understanding, competency, and commitment. And I think, this is hard work. Now, I'm not going to, give you any illusions that it's not, but it's really rewarding work. And so, I love what Dylan said about, it being magical because I think at every level, we need to turn over control. And so if you're a school leader, turn over control to your teachers, give them the grace, give them the ability to move forward. And if you're a teacher, turn that over to students and it will be magical.
Thanks, George. And just before we sum up, you're sitting there, Murray, but I'll give you the right to reply whether you've got a comment you want to add.
Yeah, thank you, Derek, because I certainly have. Looking from the perspective I come from, training young teachers, yeah, for them it's the validation and the confidence to be able to do something that's a little different. And I think it was Guy Claxton that said, the person who knows what's best for the kids in front of the teacher is the informed teacher, and I just think that's so valuable.
Thanks, Murray. Well, look, that's absolutely terrific. I've enjoyed hearing there are, even though we've spent time in New Orleans, this group, and we presented a workshop, there are new things you learn all the time from the folks online. Just going to share one last slide here, which is at the end of the show that will be sent out to you to have a look. But there are some emails there. I haven't included Dylan or Dylan's necessarily, or there are others missing. We'll put them all up there. But just to say, we are very happy to respond to questions and inquiries that come about how this resource can be used in your school. So please don't hesitate either from viewing this or with the email that's going out to all of those who registered to participate. So with that right on time, we're going to join in saying ka kite anō, as we would in New Zealand. Goodbye. We'll see you another time and enjoy the agency ride. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. So we're stopping our recording. And thank you, everybody. That was brilliant. It was so good. Enjoyed that. And we'll keep in touch, I am sure. And just remind me, Claudette, if I don't, to send you those other surveys so that you can try them out. Love to see, hear how you feel they go.
Love that. I feel like we're just going to have to start our own blog. All of us are just going to run a monthly blog where we just all talk to each other and other people listen in, right?
Sounds awesome.
It
And
does.
those to me too, Derek.
Yeah, me too, Derek.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will do. All right. I'm going to close it off now.
All
Catch
right.
you all
All
later.
right.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Good to
Thank you,
see
thank
you
you.
all.
Good to see y'all.